What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for the continued support. I truly appreciate it. If this is your first time here, my name is Edward, and on Instagram I go by Trail-Ready4Runner. Welcome. So a quick disclaimer, I am not an electrician. I'm not a professional. I do know my way around electricity from working on vehicles on my own and working on houses with my dad for many years, but I'm not a trained professional. So make sure you guys do your research, know what you're getting yourself into before you take on a electronic project. And one huge thing that I want to harp on is do your research on how much amperage you're pushing through your wires. You can cause a fire if you use thin wire. It's better to go bigger wire if you can. There is, I mean, you don't want to go massive, but the reason why I went with 0 gauge wire is because I did the big 3 on my vehicle a while ago and I had extra laying around, so I didn't really have to buy any wire because I already had it. So I could have got away with a thinner gauge wire. You don't need 0 gauge. It's really hard to work with, like to bend and to get stuff to fit properly. It's a bit overkill, but I had it laying around, so I might as well use it. All right, let's get into the video. So as you guys already know, in this video, we're gonna go over this custom fuse box panel that I made. So we got a fuse box here where all my accessories will go out. And then right under that, this is a circuit breaker. And then under that, there's a ground post here, which all my grounds are gonna go to. There's a Victron Energy Smart Shunt in here in this waterproof case that I built. And then this cable is gonna go directly to the ground of my battery. So all my electronics are gonna be managed from here. And it's really not that hard to build. All right, so let's go over what you guys are gonna need in order to put this together. I'll have a list in the description below of all the parts that you can purchase through Amazon. That way you guys can find everything. And as far as materials and equipment you're gonna use, this is gonna vary depending on what type of equipment you can get your hands on. So as far as materials, the only 2 things we're gonna use is a flat piece of aluminum. And I went to my local metal scrapyard and picked up a large scrap of aluminum plate, and then as well as a piece of scrap angled aluminum. And they're both really similar. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. Let's see. So the flat panel is a little thicker. So the thickness isn't that important. The reason why I went this thick is because I wanted to tap the aluminum, so when I do bolt in my screws, I don't have to put a nut on the other side. You can go ahead and put a nut, it doesn't really matter. I kind of just wanted it for a cleaner look, but this piece of aluminum is about 6.5 inches wide. The bracket I built, mine is about 13 inches long. This again will depend on what type of accessories you want to put on your bracket. So this plate can be put into any vehicle. It just depends on your mounting points in your engine bay. I'm using an existing bolt hole that's on the side of the engine bay that I'm gonna bolt this to, but your truck can be different. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's get into building this bracket. So what I'm doing right now is setting up my router so I can slot out the 2 slots on this bracket. I know a lot of you guys probably don't have access to a router and a track. So another option you guys can use in order to pull this off is drilling 2 holes and then using a jigsaw to cut 2 straight lines to each hole in order to make these slots. If you do have access to a track and a plunge router, all I'm doing is taking small passes to create this slot. Remember to measure twice and cut once. All right, next we're gonna move on to the aluminum angle, and we're gonna cut a slot in it with the chop saw. The reason why I'm doing this is because the aluminum angle is too wide and my slot is really close to the edge. So I have to notch out a section of it in order for the slots that I made with the router to not interfere. All right, so here's a quick layout of what I had in mind, and I'm gonna move on to marking all these holes and start drilling them out in order to make everything fit. So first I made the large hole for where the grounding post will sit, and then I marked the 2 holes on the top and bottom of it in order for me to drill it out and then tap it to the aluminum. Since I don't have a large crimper or this 0 gauge wire, I'm using this vise to make sure my connections are solid. Once you go ahead and crimp all your wires, here's the layout. This wire is going directly to the battery, and this ground wire is going directly to the battery ground. I'm gonna run a cable from the top of the fuse box to the bottom post of the grounding post that I installed. Now take your sheet of aluminum, and I created this notch with the chop saw. I didn't go all the way through. I just created a score on it in order for it to bend a lot easier. So here I'm using a torch, my welding table, and a piece of steel angle in order to create a bend in the aluminum. Once you got that all figured out, go ahead and start sanding the aluminum to get it nice and smooth and to get off any rough edges that you may have put in it. What I did here is I took the drill, drilled out 2 random holes so that when I start aluminum welding this, I can just drop some aluminum welds in those holes in order to grab the bottom piece of this bracket. Since I don't have a aluminum welding setup, what I do is I get a aluminum brazing rod and a regular torch and just heat up the metal to where it gets really hot. Once the metal gets really hot, you're able to just touch the brazing rod to the aluminum and it will melt and fill in the holes of the 2 plates, and it will weld itself together. This method is actually pretty strong. I've done this a lot of times with different projects, and the hold is a lot stronger than what I expected. So I continue using this method when working with aluminum. Now just grind off any imperfections you have, and here's the finished product with the update of notching out the area where the shunt box sits. All right, so it's been a couple of weeks and I've had this installed and I've tested everything. Everything seems to be working perfectly well. And for you 3rd gen owners, if you're wondering how I bolted this down, there's a bolt that's attached to this unit. I forget what it's called, but there's 2 bolts. There's one here that holds it down, and then there's another one over here. And I use that factory bolt to bolt this plate into place. So there's only one point holding it down, but once you have, you can use 2 bolts if you make the bracket big enough. But with the thick gauge wire and the amount of room, like this thing does not move at all. One thing you definitely have to look out for, and it just slipped my mind, I didn't think it would happen, but this power was flipped the other way so that it was touching the aluminum, and over a couple of days of driving, it actually ripped through this heat shrink and it grounded itself. Luckily, I caught it in time, and I came over, killed the switch, saw that it was this, turned it and took it off to fix it. Nothing happened to the battery or any component, but it was a short spark that happened. So just be very cautious of things rubbing. I also added on this side, on both sides, a rubber kind of gasket to the aluminum so that the metal doesn't rub on these power wires or ground wires. So I got that on both sides. I did have to drill a small hole here in order to take the power cord, which is this thin red one, from the shunt out of the waterproof box. And I made it just so it barely fits. And I pushed it through and I got power from here. Other than that, it came out really good. I'm super happy on the turnout. I'm not hitting anything. I do need to adjust the lid because the 0 gauge wire is a little too thick. But other than that, it came out really good. I'm super happy. But it's starting to rain here, so I better go inside. I don't want to get my camera gear wet. Thank you guys so much for staying to the end. I truly appreciate it. Like the video if you learned something. Subscribe if you're not already. And I'll see you on the next one. Later, guys.